Hello everyone, I'm Sue McKenna, and for the next few minutes I'm going to be talking to you as part of the Writing for Publication workshop about how one goes about writing the abstract of your journal article. First of all, we need to think about what an abstract is. The abstract is that short summary that you get at the beginning of an article. It's important to note that when you're writing an academic journal article, you're not writing a murder mystery. So unlike the blurb on the back of a novel, which saves the punchline and the final conclusions, in your abstract, you give it all away. You tell the entire synopsis of why you did the study, how you did the study, and what you found. Often the abstract is the only part that's accessible. For a lot of people, if they don't have full database access, when they search for your article, they'll only get to read the freely available abstract. So it's really important that it's clear, that it's concise, and certainly that it tempts people to read the entire article, but you do need to bear in mind that a number of people will only ever read the abstract. When you are writing the abstract, you're crafting a tiny text, a miniature version of your entire study. Thanks Sharon Clarence for this slide, which is based on the work of Kamler and Thompson. Kamler and Thompson have written a number of very useful books on doing a PhD and on writing for publication. You might like to look out for those. So basically what they argue is that an abstract has to do four things. It has to locate, focus, report, and argue. Very clearly your abstract needs to say what this paper is all about in terms of the conversation it's joining. What is going on in the literature, in the disciplinary community, in conversations around the phenomenon that you're studying. So what is your angle? What position are you taking? It needs to focus in. A journal article can never do all the things that an entire PhD thesis can do. It needs to be very focused on just one particular aspect of the problem or question. The abstract reports on how you did the study, what your main findings were, and so on. And most importantly, it presents your argument. It shows what you're trying to convince your readers of through the process of the journal article. So besides giving the overview of the paper as a whole, stating the message, giving the central argument, making it clear what the take-home message of your article is. It states the main findings, it states the methods used. Often it shows how this study relates to the key concepts and context. And very importantly, you have to find out from the journal that you're submitting your article to what the requirements are in terms of the abstract. Do they have a specific word count? Do they have a style that you're expected to use? Are you allowed to include references or are you not? These differ from journal to journal, and you need to not only read the guidelines for authors on the journal webpage, but have a look at a few of the abstracts by other authors in that journal who are writing about a similar issue to you. Think about the readership of that journal. Is this a very broad journal that speaks, for example, to higher education practitioners across disciplines? If so, you need to be very careful about using specialized terminology, jargon, if you will, because that will not make sense to the reader who only reads the abstract. On the other hand, if it's a very specialist journal speaking to a particular theoretical grouping, you can take it as given that some of the more common terminology within that particular theory will be known by the readership, and therefore you can use that terminology in the abstract. Of course, with academic writing, the general rule of thumb is if there is terminology that your reader is not automatically expected to understand, then you cannot use that terminology until you've unpacked and explained it. So you can't use terminology in the abstract that your reader shouldn't automatically be expected to understand. Some nice key questions that you can scrutinize your abstract to check that you've answered, and this comes from Wiki Online. Why did you decide to do your study? Why is this research important? Some people say that the abstract is a bit like a sales pitch. It isn't really, because it gives the entire product there in a summary form, but it does need to sound important and convincing. Why should I bother to read the rest of the article? Your abstract should make it clear that there's some significance, some importance. What problem is your research trying to better understand or to solve? What is the scope of this study? Is it a particular geographical scope, a particular historical scope? Is it a particular theoretical scope? What's included in the study? Where are the boundaries? What is your main claim or argument? You will, of course, have to discuss your methods. You need to, in the abstract, this is usually a very brief sentence or so, but you need to tell us, what data did you collect? How did you collect it? How did you analyze it? You will unpack this in much more detail in the article itself, but the abstract, we have to have some sense of the basis on which you're making the argument that you tell us in the abstract. And indeed, in almost every case, except for in something called a descriptive abstract, you do give the results. You make it clear what's the take-home message, what's this article all about, what answers did you find, was your hypothesis proven or disproven, how were your research questions answered if they were, what new questions arise, what are the implications of the study, why should we care? We should read this abstract and come to the conclusion that there's an important, powerful argument, one that we want to know more about. On the other hand, we should also have a very clear sense of what that argument is without having to read any further. So avoid using acronyms unless these are really very widely used acronyms. In general, you should spell words out in full. Avoid using any terminology that requires explanation that you can't expect your readers to automatically understand. Do not use big words and jargon that your readers don't understand already. Different journals have different regulations around references. Some allow references in brackets within the abstract itself, others do not. So have a look at the requirements of the journal. Sometimes you can use the names of people whose names are associated with certain theories. So I might be able to say Vygotsky's zone of proximal development without necessarily including a reference. Have a look at examples in the journal. You can't include tables or figures in your abstract, and generally speaking, you don't include any direct quotes in the abstract. The abstract is the thing that you write last. It is, after all, the synopsis of the entire study as articulated in the entire journal article. But having said that, it's often worthwhile to write a little holding text for yourself while you're drafting your article. Something like, in the abstract, I will explain that my main argument is XYZ, that the study took place in ABC, that I collect data from 1, 2, 3, and I analyzed it in the method of 4, 5, 6. So make some little notes for yourself about what are the key aspects of the study that need to be briefly mentioned within the limited word count of the abstract. Good luck and all the best. I look forward to reading your draft abstracts.